My name is Lacey Greaney, and currently I'm over all the radio communications infrastructure at the Calcasieu Parish Sheriff's Office in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Today, my role has changed from a dispatcher, which is where I originally came from, to being over all the communications infrastructure. I deal with all the patrol, dealing with all their radio equipment, from the radios inside their cars to portable radios to dealing with the radio towers and equipment that we have in our area, and manage everything that has to do with the electronics on that end. I like working with all the guys and helping them out when they have issues, because a lot of the patrolmen don't understand how the radio system works, or some of them don't even understand how all their equipment functions. And being able to explain to them how it works and seeing the light go off when they figure it out and letting them use it to the best of their ability. The biggest challenge, in a way, is coming from being a dispatcher and a female, making it into a area that is male dominated, and most of the guys there come from a background where they either have electronics or radio communications that they started off with, and I had to go from nothing to that. But I absolutely love it, and everybody has been extremely welcoming. I really helped out a lot anytime we had problems with the radios, and I found it interesting that there was so much more to the side than just being an end user and pushing a button to talk. When we'd have to work with outside companies and other agencies to work through problems, the technology just kind of came naturally to me, and I found it interesting on how it actually worked instead of just being a user. At our agency, we have about 1,000 employees, and most of these employees all have at least one radio, if not, two, having one in their car. Inventory is major. We're constantly dealing with, upgrades and changes, and it's interesting. It's busy. It's a lot busier than I ever thought it would have been, but I love it. Usually we find humor in it. We take it pretty easy. We don't take anything too serious, because basically almost everything has a solution, and we'll find a way to make it through. I would probably say that it's challenging. Keeping up with today's technology definitely makes it challenging. I want to tell a story of what our dispatchers went through in 2020 during Hurricane Laura. At the time, I was a sergeant in dispatch, and Hurricane Laura was coming, so we called in all our dispatchers, divided them into two shifts. We had a day shift and a night shift, and the day shift was supposed to be sleeping because we were on nights, and the night shift was working in the radio room. They were taking calls as the weather got bad. People were calling, wanting to be rescued, needing to be rescued. We had mobile homes that had flipped and campers that flipped, and people were stuck inside them. But there was no way that we could send anybody. It was really heartbreaking for some of these dispatchers to stay on the phone with people screaming for their lives, knowing that there was nothing that we could do or send anybody to rescue them. But as they're doing this, we hear some crazy noises, and our roof on our sheriff's office above our dispatch center peels off, and we start taking on water. Our dispatchers were some of the bravest people that I've ever met. They stood there with no roof, having rain pouring in on their heads, refusing to hang up with these callers. As supervisors, we literally had to go in there and force these dispatchers to hang up with these callers and have them leave for their safety. We got them evacuated, and we had patrol guys assist us with salvaging anything out of the radio room we could, because we're talking radio equipment, dispatching equipment, phones, everything. And our guys helped us tremendously, and within 15 minutes we were able to steal some of our warrants division space and set up a complete dispatch center for them. And after the storm had cleared and we realized that our parish and our city was a lot worse off than we would have ever expected, and we had deputies go out to start surveying the area and take account into what was lost. All the vehicles that were parked at our offices, including the dispatchers, were damaged, if not totaled, from the hurricane. So we have dispatchers dealing with major losses. And then when the deputies went further out into the world, they found out that most of our dispatchers and patrolmen are now going to be homeless because their houses were completely destroyed by these hurricanes. It was extremely stressful. They didn't know how to deal with everything, but they never ever took a break. They dispatched all the calls that had held from when the hurricane was passing through for people wanting rescues and needing to be recovered from trees that went through houses and people that were trapped in them, campers that were flipped that had people in them that didn't evacuate. Like, they underestimated what the storm was going to be. And then we had deputies going out finding that the dispatchers didn't have houses to go home to. We had 13 agencies from all over the country come in to assist us, and our dispatchers that are already under a lot of stress geared up, teamed up together, and assisted. We worked through agencies not knowing our radio etiquette, not knowing, how to use our radio codes, our signal codes, or understanding anything that we were saying. And we all had to work together to figure out almost a plain talk for the dispatchers to be able to communicate with the officers and deputies and, state police, everybody that came in to assist us. And while we're working through this and living out of our office, all our dispatchers ended up with COVID during the heat of COVID. Well, it's such a specialized job working with our equipment that we couldn't send them home, that we didn't have replacements that could come in and do their jobs. And they knew that there was nobody else that could do their job, and they all volunteered to stay, even through COVID and losing their houses, their cars, and everything around them. They stayed and worked 14 to 16 hour shifts every day, working with these deputies just trying to help all the citizens of our parish. They truly did amazing jobs. We had several of them that had to go to the hospital that were put on IVs and extremely ill, but refused to leave. They stayed and did their job through unimaginable stress. It was really amazing what they did. We stayed at the office. I know I stayed for 45 days straight because I didn't have power or anything else. And a lot of other people had to stay that long too, but that's when we were finally allowed to go home. And once we got to go home, I only got to stay home for 3 days before Hurricane Delta set his eyes on the same place that Laura hit. So we had to recall all those same dispatchers that had already been through hell and stress beyond imagine to come back in and do it all over again. And when Hurricane Delta hit, it was a lot different. We still had all those agencies from all over the country helping us, but it was more of a water event than really it was a wind event. So we had to deal with completely different issues. We had people getting flooded and needing rescued from our high water trucks. The National Guard came in and brought giant trucks to help people, and our dispatchers stepped up and dealt with everything. We had hundreds of calls on the dispatch screen, trying to dispatch to people that aren't from our area, that don't know our streets and our maps, and they absolutely did amazing. After the second hurricane passed, we finally got a temporary building in to set up a dispatch, which was a great relief for them. They absolutely were loving it. They had more room, and they actually had real desks and computers to work off of, and they were great. They really were great through it all. And then we hit a crazy weather event. We had an ice storm hit, and in Louisiana we don't get ice storm, we barely get freezes, and everything in the city froze, and we were right back staying at the office again on air mattresses with our beds and snacks and everything else to work through the major freeze. But it went pretty smooth. Our girls and guys didn't complain. They were real troopers, amazing. But they made it through and did great. And then a few months later, our area, Lake Charles, got hit with a historic flood. The city received over a foot of rain in an hour and a half. We had massive flooding. It was during business hours. We had kids trapped in daycares and schools, and people that drove their vehicles through water and were stuck in their vehicles having to be rescued. People that couldn't even swim that actually went out in the water. And our dispatchers all came in together. They rallied in and were dispatching, doing the best that they could with everything that they had, because we're still working off of temporary equipment because, it's COVID, there's a backlog. We can't get equipment to replace what we lost during the hurricane, so they're still struggling. And during this storm, the temporary building we were in ended up having a major leak where part of the roof lifted. And again, we lost more dispatch equipment, but the girls were great. And again, we had to make them leave the building. They were not going to leave until they got the job done. They were, like I said, they're truly amazing people. But we ended up getting our building repaired, and we were in the building for a year and a half before we ever got anywhere close to getting our dispatch center back. It was incredibly hard getting the equipment to replace what we lost, and COVID really put a knot in that. But these girls went above and beyond by working outside in a temporary building with no bathrooms, no running water. So every time they needed something, they had to basically hike back to our main office and go to the bathroom, or heat up food and get water and stuff. But the Weather Channel even came into Lake Charles and did a special and said that Lake Charles was the worst weather-battered city in the entire United States. And I saved that video for posterity, really. But these girls survived it, and I really don't know how they did, but I think they deserve the world for doing what they did. I don't know any other area or any other set of dispatchers that could have ever came through what they've come through. It was truly amazing.